Good morning. It is 9:17 a.m. on Monday, May 27th, 2019. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. So it is, of course, Memorial Day, and I think it is easy to forget sometimes and to just get caught up in thinking of it as a holiday weekend. But, of course, it is a holiday because of a reason. We want to memorialize the folks who are willing to risk their lives and sometimes give them up for the protection of the United States. And I hope that in the future we can try to, as much as possible, make that sacrifice unnecessary. That's not going to happen quickly, but, it seems like a goal to aim for. Anyway, it's also the last day of Balticon, and yesterday went really well. It was my busy day. So I was on 3 different panels and also had my reading and my launch party. And the launch party went pretty well, even though I tend to be disproportionately stressed out by trying to plan those sorts of things. But it went great. I had help from several friends. Turned out that there was even more food than I had prepared still in there because it was left over from prior lunch parties. And, hey, who turns down free food, right? Anyway, the launch party went pretty well. It's one of those things where, I've not been trying to make writing work as a business really ever. Like, it's one thing to try to say, oh, hey, here's something you can buy. It's another thing to try to say, do the math of a budget of like, I printed out these little cards and those cost X dollars, and how many extra sales do I think that produces? I don't know. So any of that stuff is very hard to gauge. But if we gauge the party on the metric of did people show up and have fun, then yes, big success. So I also had a couple of panels. So I had a panel on history of podcasting. And, it mostly turned into, old folks' corner talking about how good it was back in the day. And then we got into a semantic argument about what constitutes a podcast and how specific that needs to be. And it's like, does generic serialized content count as a podcast, even if it's not distributed via an RSS feed? And frankly, I think semantically the answer is no, but it starts becoming a question of, is that a distinction without a difference? Anyway, the last panel I had last night was Cutthroat Fiction, and the idea was we were writing flash fiction live on the panel, and they kept calling out rules that we had to follow. Now, those rules actually entailed a lot of rapid-fire changes to the point where I kind of felt like you almost didn't have time to follow any given rule before the next one showed up. But I will now read for all of you my story from last night's panel of Cutthroat Fiction. The initial rules involved that this story had to have a squirrel. It had to have a bag of jelly babies. It needed to mention one of the other panelists, and mine mentions Keith Hughes. And there were other various rules. Midway through, someone had to speak in a line of Yoda speak. Someone had to try to kiss something. It had to be a thunderstorm, had to take place in the future. There were other various rules like, okay, for the next minute, you can't use the letter B. Okay, the next 5 sentences have to have double letter words in them. The next 2 sentences have to rhyme, that sort of thing. So, but without further ado, my story. I think that squirrel is following us, said Keith. People really shouldn't feed them, said Karen. She held her hand out from under the awning. It deprives them of the hunger that drives their natural instincts. No, I don't mean like that it's coming closer to beg for food. I think that's the same squirrel from the park across town. Karen sighed in frustration. You always do this, Keith. Find some strange little detail to fixate on so you can avoid the real conversation. The thunder accompanied her pronouncement to give it adequate gravity. I'm serious, Keith insisted. It has the same little notch in its ear and that black spot on its belly. I can't do this anymore, Keith. We need to take some time apart. It's coming this way, Keith shouted. Quick, look casual. Kiss me. He leaned into make-out position, but Karen pulled away. What the hell are you doing? She asked. Kissing you, I am, he said. Watching us, it is. Are you losing your mind? Karen's angry scowl turned perplexed. What the hell are you talking about? Go away, Keith shouted at the squirrel, and he attempted to seize a passerby's bag of jelly babies to throw it at the critter, but the lid popped open and it drenched him with melted jelly candy. Hey, said the passerby, who the hell do you... Get down, shouted Keith, tackling the man who was dressed in a plumber's uniform. They went down to the wet pavement together, and the man's monkey wrench clanked and skittered across the pavement. Karen frowned. The squirrel had indeed approached quite close and did not seem at all frightened of the violent activity mere feet away. No, cried Keith. No, get back. Then the squirrel leapt upon him and began to slash and tear, drawing blood in several places along his scalp. Then, out of nowhere, a bulldog with a loose trailing leash charged into the scene, barking up a storm. The squirrel finally fled, with a speed belying its form. Keith, said Karen, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Everything is drama with you. Keith patted at his lacerated scalp and looked around. Did you see where it went? We have to get out of here. I am getting out of here right now, said Karen. Rain or no, I'll call a future Uber. That squirrel isn't done with us, not by a long shot. Elizabeth is dating her AI assistant now, and he makes her happy. Next time, squirrel, shouted Keith, shaking his fist. Next time, I'll be ready. And there it is. So I have to finish getting packed so that I can check out at the hotel before my panel. I have a panel at 10, 11, and 12. And so one of those is the future of podcasting. One of them is Twitch for Dummies, which is based on T. Morris's new Twitch for Dummies book. You might keep an eye out. It's possible there could be some streaming from that panel. And then, of course, the last panel is how technology can aid with collaborative storytelling, which is, of course, something I have opinions about. So I'll go ahead and leave it there for now, but I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.